Hi, everyone. Welcome to our virtual book club. My name is Karen Sadi, and I'm the program manager at the Women's Executive Network. We are very pleased and honored to have Jodi Kovitz here with us today. Jodi is the Toronto-based founder and CEO of Move the Dial, a global movement she launched in January 2017 to advance the participation and leadership of women in tech. Move the Dial has engaged more than 60,000 people through the power of storytelling and driving substantial, measurable change in tech. In 2020, Jodi was recognized by the International Association of Business Communicators as Communicator of the Year. In 2019 and 2017, she was recognized as one of our own Canada's top 100 most powerful women. And in 2018, she was recognized as the Toronto Brand Star by Adweek and a top 25 woman of influence. She's a mom to 11-year-old Lily, loves to travel, spin, cook, and practice yoga. Wow, that's quite a great sort of bio, Jodi. That's awesome. And now I would like to pass it on to you, and enjoy the session, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this bright, wherever you are in Toronto, it is bright and sunny today. So I'm delighted to be here with you. I am really inspired by the unique energy that the Women's Executive Network has put into trying to foster connection amongst this community. So it's truly my pleasure and honor to be part of the community today and be here with you. So I've been doing work in the inclusion and equity space for about 4 years. And, you know, in this moment, I think we need this work more than ever before. It is really a time of isolation. And even though we're connected deeply through technology, I'm sure many of you would agree with the notion that so many of us feel disconnected, deeply disconnected from other human beings, from the casual kind of interactions that we have at events and out and about and at our offices, to, you know, some of us, when I don't have my daughter, you know, I'm alone, really alone in my condo for days on end. And many of you, I'm sure, in the same position, feeling sort of isolated physically, socially. And, you know, on top of this, the role and toll that this new life that many of us are having to lead during the pandemic, the toll that it's taking on us is pretty significant. And the data, the actual hard data, demonstrates and suggests that the toll is way harder on women and, you know, people who identify as women. Now, I would say from an inclusion perspective, there are many folks who have caregiving roles, whether it's of children or parents or others, that don't necessarily just identify as women, but the data is very clear that women are stepping out of the workforce or having to scale back significantly with the disproportionate impact that this pandemic is having on us. You know, this is a real concern because we have been working so hard to advance gender equity and certainly, and most importantly, with an intersectional lens, really thinking about our historically and still currently most marginalized women identifying folks. You know, we've been working at this for so many decades, and I'm very concerned that this pandemic is going to put us behind. So sort of we picture the single mom who has no choice but to manage her children's school, all the meals, all the cleaning, all the cooking, even if she has a highly intense, demanding career. At the end of the day, that 5-6 hours of work, like she's the only person who can do it. Similarly, you know, families who are living in intergenerational homes and there's caregiving up and caregiving down. I picture also the small business owner who, you know, wants to try to keep her shop open to selling essential services, but has kids at home. You know, these are real situations, and people have really struggled, you know, in the home, as well as the significant loss and grief that we've all had as a society. And I think, you know, thinking about these consequences, and that they won't disappear when the pandemic is over, is something that really makes me think deeply about how can I share from my own lived experience and perspective, working so closely with so many women, helping women to advance over many years. How can I help sort of be accretive to the conversation of like, what can we do to move our own dials as we come out. So for those of you who read the book, there's lots of concepts in the book. There's lots of thoughts around equity and inclusion and going out of our way sort of at a societal level and at a corporate level. But today, I really want to be mindful of those of you who have joined and really thinking about in our own lives, how can we apply some of the concepts that I've learned to help you perhaps, move your own dial. And, for those of you who have read the book, my story. I, started as an entrepreneur at a very early age. I've built a number of things over the course of my life. I was a divorce lawyer. Then I did strategy and business development at a very large national law firm where I learned a ton from my incredible mentors. And then I, became a CEO of a tech association that was focused on advancing and developing CEOs of tech company. There was no women around there when I arrived. I looked around, I was like, where's all the women? And that was really how the notion of the seed of Move the Dial was born. And Move the Dial is an organization that I founded formally in 2017 after I, did a whole bunch of little experiments with it over the course of 2016. And I basically put, a sort of a stake in the ground and said, we need to go out of our way to move the dial if we want the leadership of the tech and innovation community to look different than what it does. And for those of you who are in tech, you've experienced this. For those of you who are in any form of company right now, tech is everything to everyone, especially now that we're all remote. Doesn't matter if you're in consumer goods or if you're in any kind of food business or any kind of communications business, like whatever we do, tech is touching all of our lives. So the fact that there are so few people who identify as women and also, so few traditionally, historically, more even marginalized folks and our friends who identify as BIPOC and in all other sort of intersections of identity, people with all forms of different abilities, people with different sexual orientations and identities, there is a massive gap in the tech and innovation industry. And so that gap is going to get bigger. And what I learned over the course of my time at Move the Dial is there's really no magic bullet. There's no like one size fits all solution as to how we change equity in society. There's really a combination of many, many small acts. And when we are able to be super mindful and thoughtful around the many small acts we take as a society and as a collective, but also for ourselves, with agency, that is how the dial moves. And I don't think that's, certainly just something that's relevant to the tech industry. I think it's definitely relevant to everything. So what I wanted to focus on today, and, we've got an agenda, we've got lots of questions. I definitely want to invite you to participate and ask your questions and don't feel shy to ask me anything. If I don't want to answer it, I'll tell you I don't want to answer it, but I'm a pretty open book, and I'm really wanted to just be here today to be in service of you and of this community. So what I want to talk about today is really a dial moving tactic that's so important right now. So right now we are in a global pandemic. This is unprecedented in our lifetime. And while there are so many layers of what is super difficult about being part of this pandemic, personally, from our mental wellness perspective, our families, actually the pain and grief of actually dealing with COVID for those of us that have had to sort of live with it and go through it or be touched by it in some direct way, I think it's also really important to be focused on the future for those of us that are really trying to sort of push off from here and remain optimistic, even recognizing that it's been a very difficult time. So for me, when I think about push off from here, which is a concept I read about in an incredible book by a woman named Laura McGowan, and I encourage you to read it if you're looking for something. If anybody, who's listening today has struggled with either becoming deliberate about a commitment to a habit and or has sought to overcome addiction, it's an incredible book. And I'm a huge studier of habit and discipline and ritual and how do you actually make those things stick. And so with that in mind, thinking about pushing off from here and how can we move our own dials specifically as folks that are identifying as women participating today and thinking about the future we have to think about our relationships, because to me, even though we are living in this deeply connected but majorly disconnected world, relationships are everything still. They really are. And I don't know how many of you on the line have read Dale Carnegie's book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, but it certainly influenced me early in my career and taught me the value and significance of really building solid, meaningful relationships. And so when I sat down to write Go Out of Your Way, I really wanted to share some of my philosophies around how we can best move our own dials. And to me, one of the best ways in which we can move our own dials is to be super intentional and highly proactive about how we build and cultivate meaningful relationships. And so that, for those of you who have read it, is a big chapter of the book. And I'm going to pause now, and I'm going to start into one of the chapters of the book that I wanted to share with you, that I'm going to read as I was asked to do for this book club. And then when we get out of that chapter, I'm going to take questions. I'll take a pause and see if there's any questions at that time. And then I'm going to move into a discussion of how we can build relationships in a global pandemic, because of course it's very hard to do that in the traditional sense. So that's my agenda. And at this point, I'm gonna read chapter 3 in the book. There it is. And this is a reading of chapter 3, and the chapter is called Just Say Hello. And actually, a little insider information, I had long been dreaming up the book Just Say Hello before this book was ever written. And I started writing the book Just Say Hello at a hotel in New York 5 years ago, when the content started to really flow out of me. And the notion of Just Say Hello, the background story of that is that when I was very young, my dad taught me about the value of building relationships, of listening, of soul-to-soul connection. And so I decided to build it into this book, and I'm sure, you know, at some point, the full book around Just Say Hello, which was really around how to cultivate meaningful relationships in a digital age, will come to life. But for today's purposes, I'm going to launch into this chapter so you can follow along or just have a listen. So chapter 3 of Go Out of Your Way, Just Say Hello. During my late 20s and early 30s, when I was newly married, a newly minted family lawyer, and a new mother, my then husband and I went through a challenging time. That is a classic work from home problem. My dishwasher's going. So didn't realize it was on. I'm gonna pause it for 1 second and turn it off, because it's gonna be very annoying. And this is the authenticity of keynoting working from home. 1 second. Sorry about that. Okay. During my late 20s and early 30s, when I was newly married, a newly minted family lawyer, and a new mother, my then husband and I went through a challenging time. The year I was pregnant with Lily, my mother-in-law was diagnosed with cancer. She died a few months after Lily was born. During the last 10 weeks of my pregnancy, I had to go on bed rest. Then, when Lily was 2, she began running high fevers and had a lot of trouble breathing. The doctors discovered she had a bacteria in her system that had developed into a rare and potentially fatal infection. For the next 2 years, she was in and out of the hospital battling different infections. She recovered, thank goodness, and today is perfectly healthy. But we spent many nights at the hospital hovering over the bedside of a desperately ill child. As a counterpoint to all of this, something else was weighing on me, the sinking feeling I'd chosen the wrong career. I had never had a burning desire to become a lawyer, and nobody had ever pressured me to become one. Law school was my backup plan. My dad and stepdad are both lawyers, and my mom is a psychologist in private practice. I figured if I had a law degree and couldn't earn a living any other way, I could hang out a shingle and become a sole practitioner like them. But things have a way of changing. Even though it had never been my intention to join a firm, during law school, I became interested in collaborative family law, and after I graduated, I joined one where I had the opportunity to work in that area. I devoted half my time to practicing collaborative family law and the other half to supporting my boss's litigation practice. I was good with the clients. I started to get referrals, and after 5 years, I built up a thriving practice of my own. But being a family lawyer was sucking the life out of me. My days were a constant blur of rushing to court, rushing to client meetings, rushing home to Lily, and then rushing back to the office to prepare for a court proceeding the following day. As much as I enjoyed helping clients navigate one of the most traumatic times in their lives, the work was emotionally draining, and I found it hard to detach from their problems at the end of the day. The fact that my own marriage was unraveling did not help matters. It was all taking all of my energy just to make it through the day. I didn't have any left over for pursuits I loved, and one by one, they fell away. I stopped working out, I stopped seeing friends, I stopped connecting with people, I stopped doing community work, I stopped getting out into nature. I was so depleted that even going for a walk seemed like too much to ask, and I wasn't being the role model I wanted to be for Lily. For a long time, I don't think I even knew how unhappy I was. If I admitted it, then I'd have to do something about it, and the prospect of starting over was too terrifying to contemplate. Instead, I retreated numbly into my routines and continued to stay stuck. Eventually, I could no longer look away, but when I finally acknowledged something had to change, I had no idea where to start or even what direction to head in. It all felt hopelessly overwhelming. When I was growing up, my stepdad always used to tell me that if I had a problem that felt too big and too daunting, the best way to tackle it was by breaking it down. How do you eat the elephant? He'd say. I knew the answer was by taking one bite at a time. So I asked myself, what's the one change I can make right now that will help me move forward in my life in some way? And the answer was to go back to Bikram yoga. I did Bikram yoga routinely for 10 years before I became a mother and lawyer. Bikram yoga isn't for everyone. You have to do it in a room where the heat feels equatorial and the sweat cascades off of you the whole time. But you feel great afterwards, or at least I did. After I had to take on so many new responsibilities, though, I lost my discipline around my yoga practice. I missed going. I thought about going all the time. I even longed to go, but I kept finding excuses not to go. Eventually, I got sick of living in misery, so I decided to buy a month's pass. I figured buying the pass would force me to go, but I didn't use that pass once the whole month. I bought another pass. That time, I went to 2 classes. It took every ounce of will I had to drag myself to those classes, but I forced myself to go, and going gave me the impetus I needed to start attending classes on a more regular basis. It felt so great to set a goal, bring intention to the task, and regain a modicum of control over one small area of my life. But for me, what was really transformative about the experience was that through the meditation and quiet of my yoga practice, I was able to find the calm and mental space that I needed to reconnect with myself. Once I found that interior oasis, I also found the energy to reflect on who I was and what mattered most to me. And through that reflective process, themes began to emerge. The first theme was that I was and have always been a business and revenue person. I realized I'd been creating a business ever since I was a teenager and had launched my first enterprise, handheld cards, at 16. I designed custom cards and sold them to local card shops. My mom took me downtown to a Japanese paper shop that stocked beautiful papers. I made collages out of the papers, designed the cards, packaged my creations in plastic envelopes, and sealed them with handheld cards, gold fan sticker. I wanted every person who received one of my cards to feel as though it had been made especially for them. I never made a profit, but I pulled in decent revenue while learning how to hustle and build relationships with clients. I didn't realize it at the time, but handheld cards was the first brand I ever created. Later, I developed a passion for purpose-driven enterprises, launching 2 of them during my 20s. Both endeavors became going concerns that raised funds for charitable causes, and one attracted serious sponsorship money. I also developed a fundraising strategy for a Jewish organization with which I was involved at the time, whose goal was to interest young Jewish adults in reconnecting with their roots. The evidence was undeniable. I had a dominant entrepreneurial gene. The second theme that jumped out at me is that I was a lifelong connector and relationship builder who loved coaching people, bringing them together, and rallying them to a cause. I first learned how to be a leader at summer camp. I was a counselor and swim instructor. I sat on the camp council, and during one summer, I led the counselor in training program. I loved every single minute I spent at camp. From a leader perspective, for many reasons, I considered camp to be one of the most formative experiences of my life. I had 3 key pieces of information. I knew how to generate revenue, make deals happen, and bring a vision to life. I was put on this earth to connect, coach, and lead people, and I wouldn't be happy unless I was repairing the world in some way. Those themes had been staring at me in the face for a while. I just couldn't see them. I didn't know yet what I was going to do with that information, nor did I have a clue as to what destination I was headed. I just knew I had to start taking steps in that general direction. But once I had a roadmap, the dial really began to move for me. In July 2011, I began going through my contacts to see who I could reach out to about pivoting my career. I wasn't just looking for people who might be willing to offer me a job. I was looking for people who might be willing to have coffee with me and connect me with someone who could use my skills. I was also thinking about people I didn't actually know, but whose stories aligned with mine in some way and who might consider meeting with me. One of the first people I reached out to was the COO of a leading business law firm. We'd never met, but I'd heard her speak and thought she'd made some interesting career pivots. Before assuming her current position, she'd worked in investment banking, been a senior vice president of a global human resources for a bank, and had also become a partner in a consulting firm that advised boards on governance and executive comp. Her unconventional career path and the fact that she was doing a business job in a law context made me think she might have some advice to offer me. Before I reached out, I researched her online extensively and spoke to one of her former colleagues who had complimentary things to say. After I did some deep background research, I crafted an email. I kept it brief and to the point. I heard you speak. I was inspired by your talk. I think you've made some interesting career transitions. I'm going through one of my own and would love to hear your story. Would you be willing to have a coffee with me? I think I proofed that email 100 times before I sent it. Eventually, I dialed up my courage and I hit send. I wanted to hear back, of course. But to mitigate disappointment, I tamped down my expectations with all of the usual disclaimers. She's a busy woman. She probably gets tons of requests like mine. She has more important things to do than have a coffee with a complete stranger. I heard back the next day. Yes, I'll have coffee with you. Once I got over my glee, I knew I couldn't just show up at that meeting and start blathering on. So I got to work crafting my spiel. I crafted it as strategically as I'd crafted my email. I built it around 3 points. I'm a business person and revenue driver. I'm a connector and team builder who's passionate about coaching others. And my strongest suit is my ability to develop relationships. Then I backed up those statements with evidence. Here's where I created something from nothing. And the revenue, and here's the revenue that was generated. Here's where I saw opportunities that no one else saw, and here's what I did with them. Here's where I brought people on side, and here's what the outcome was. I rehearsed my pitch until it flowed out of me. On the appointed day, a friend walked over to the meeting, and I practiced on him one more time. Walked me over to the meeting. The COO greeted me with a big smile. Her warmth instantly relaxed me. We exchanged a few niceties, and I asked her to tell me her story. I was genuinely curious to hear it, but I also knew what bad form it would have been to start talking about myself. She gave me a little précis on her career and then asked me to tell her about myself. I did my spiel. When I finished, I said, so that's my story. Do you know anyone who would want to hire me? I would have considered that meeting a success if we'd established a good rapport, and all she'd said was that she didn't know anyone at the moment but would keep a lookout and offered to make a connection for me. But that's not what she said. What she actually said was, actually, I might want to hire you. For a minute, I thought she was kidding. It turned out that she was putting together a strategic business development team to teach young lawyers in the firm how to develop business relationships and attract clients. I wound up becoming her first hire. I signed the official offer in mid-August, gave 6 weeks notice at my law firm, and joined her firm in mid-October as manager of business development and litigation. The opportunity turned out to be career-altering for me. And to this day, that COO remains one of my greatest champions and sponsors, and it all came from a cold email. I fundamentally believe that the best way to succeed in life is by building meaningful relationships. And that line is so important to me that I'm going to actually read that line again. I fundamentally believe the best way to succeed in life is by building meaningful relationships. I don't think you can actually become successful unless you know how to connect with people and build strong rapport with them. Virtually every door that has opened for me has opened because of a connection that I have made with another human being. In almost every case, the only reason I have a relationship with that person is because I mustered the courage to reach out to them and say hello. Saying hello is the most effective way I have ever found to initiate a lasting connection. That said, I acknowledge 1,000,000% my relative privilege in the world, and that it may be way easier for me to do this by virtue of my intersecting identities than theirs. That said, regardless of who we are, it takes courage to say hello, especially if that person has a formidable reputation and is someone you admire. What if you don't get the reaction you expect? What if you get no reaction at all? But mentors and champions don't just land on you like a piece of fluff. You have to go get them. And saying hello is the first step in that process. Many people think it's impossible to connect with influential people, but that hasn't been my experience at all. Fair warning though, saying hello is not easier and doesn't necessarily get easier because you've done it many times before. It takes courage every single time. If I'm terrified to approach someone, I ask myself, what is the worst thing that can happen? Unless the answer is I'll catch on fire, I figure I have not got an excuse for inaction. I vividly remember shaking in my boots the first time I said hello to the mayor. It was the last morning of the trade mission trip that I went on to Israel. And I knew it was the last chance I'd get. So when I spotted him having breakfast with his wife in the coffee shop of our Jerusalem hotel, I went over to their table and introduced myself. To be fair, I have an advantage in this area. I'm not shy. I truly love meeting new people. I once took a personality test that revealed I have a natural aptitude for connecting, and that is true. But I've also spent years coaching people who don't feel comfortable connecting with others on how to do it well. So I know that anyone can get better at this if they're committed to trying. My dad was the first person to teach me how to connect with people. I have a clear memory of him taking me to his office when I was 6 years old and introducing me to his assistant. I remember the kind and deeply respectful way that he spoke to her, the way he listened deeply when she spoke to him, and the way he brought her Hershey's Kisses. The chocolates were just a small thing, but I remember how her face lit up when he gave them to her. I think the reason I have such an indelible memory of that exchange is because it was the first time I recognized the power of a small, benevolent act. I learned a lot about relationship building from my dad. He started out as a commercial litigator, but then moved to deal making, and you don't succeed at making deals with people unless you know how to win their trust. I think one of the reasons he's been so successful is because he talks to everybody he meets, and because he has a way of making everybody he meets feel special. People are just people to him. He'll talk to you the same, whether you're the janitor or the prime minister, and he'll be equally interested in hearing your story. He taught me by example that if you want to connect with people, you have to care about who they are and be curious about their stories. Unfortunately, relationship building has become a bit of a lost art these days, unless the relationship you're interested in building is with a robot. After all, why bother connecting with a human when it's so much easier sometimes to send a text or emojis? We're so mesmerized by our phones that so many of us as people wouldn't even recognize a connecting opportunity if we walked right into it. And yet, knowing how to build business relationships has never, ever been more important, given how many of us will change jobs in our lifetimes, and even more so now with the pandemic. I saw how much of a lost art relationship building has become when I did some consulting work. I used to go into companies and coach sales teams on how to build business relationships. I did an exercise where I asked every person in the room to introduce themselves, only they weren't allowed to say what they did for a living. They had to say something about who they were outside of the office. In one company in which I did this exercise, and where the 100 or so people in the room had been working together for many years, more than 5 people had earned black belts in karate in the room. 5, and that's a very rare thing. And nobody knew this about each other. For me, the really astonishing part of the story is that if you have a black belt in karate, it's like you're in a cult. Black belts are besties, apparently. But no one in that room had ever bothered to ask the person who sat beside them every single day anything about their life. Somebody could have traveled to Mars for the weekend and no one in that room would have had a clue. But if you can't even muster the curiosity about the people you work with every single day, why would you care about someone you don't even know? And if you don't care enough about another person to ask them a question about their life, how can you possibly establish a connection with them? Let alone build the rapport you need to develop the kind of relationship that will help you succeed in business and life. This brings us to the first rule of relationship building. Human connections have to start at the human level. I once coached a friend who was an associate at a law firm. She wanted to become a partner. To rise to that level, she had to demonstrate her ability to attract clients. We were in a taxi on our way to a party one evening when she turned to me and with great determination in her voice said, "Jodi, you are going to be really proud of me tonight. I am going to this event and I'm going to go home with a file." No, I shook my head. You don't go to a party to get a file. You go to a party to make a friend. Side note, what's a party? Like, when's the last time any of us went to a party? I don't even remember what they are. Anyway, my friend's view of networking is hardly unique. I encounter many people who think often of networking as purely a transactional exchange. They go into every interaction or meeting with an agenda or an ask. But if you're focused on when you meet someone, only on closing the deal, the relationship will go nowhere. How do you think my coffee meeting with the COO would have gone if all I focused on was what I could get out of the exchange? But what if you thought about connecting in a very different way? What if instead of going to an event with an agenda in your mind, your sole purpose was to say hello to everyone you meet, strike up a conversation with them, listen intently to what they say, and get to know them a little bit? What if, when the conversation turns to you, you talk about something other than what you do for a living? Something that makes you interesting and unique and fun to talk to. Your black belt in karate, for instance, your vintage record collection, how you've been thinking about chucking it all and becoming a marine biologist. What if your only goal is to get the conversation flowing naturally, so to see if you have a connection with that person? Do you like them? What do they seem like to you? Do you have anything in common? It's really not that different from being on a date. If you follow that protocol every single time and each time try to come away with business cards of 5 people with whom you sparked an essentially meaningless, start that again. If you follow that protocol every time and each time you try to come away with the business cards of 5 people with whom you sparked a genuine connection, instead of winding up with a bunch of essentially meaningless business cards that you'll toss in a drawer and probably never look at again, here's what will happen. You'll have a rich wellspring of connections that actually have potential to become something more. And then you can start developing them into that something more. To be successful, you need to develop your hellos into a handful of what I call key dial moving relationships. And I think that line is so important, I'm going to share it again. To be successful, you will need to develop your hellos into a handful of key dial moving relationships. Those are the relationships that you're going to spend the majority of your time fostering. If you invest wisely in those genuine connections and build them into meaningful relationships, these people will become your sponsors and champions. How many do you need? The answer, of course, is different for everyone, but I think most people can only manage a handful. Since I'm an essentialist at heart, for me, the magic number is 6. I call those 6 people my hub. You have to pick your 6, but how do you know who your 6 people in your hub are? How do you pick them? Here's where things start to get a little more specific. To qualify for hub entry, those people have to pass 2 tests. 1, they have to be people with whom you already have a strong rapport or with whom you've established a genuine enough connection to feel you can work on fanning that spark into something more. 2, they have to be people who are actually in a position to help you achieve your goals. This means they have to meet 1 or more of the following conditions. They have to have a seat at the table when the opportunities you're interested in come up, and be there to sing your praises. Travel in circles where they can connect you to people who can help you get where you want to go, have experience directly relevant to your goals, and can therefore help you achieve them faster by coaching you, for instance. The first thing you have to do is define what your goals are. Let's say you have 3, a personal goal, a short-term professional goal, and a long-term professional goal. Then let's say you need 2 people to help you achieve each one. Maybe your short-term career goal is to earn a promotion. If so, you'll definitely want your boss in your hub because you will need your boss to believe in you, mentor you, and support you and champion you. But you also should think about who else you know or can get to know who has this way to champion you for that promotion or experience to help you achieve it. That person belongs in your hub as well. Next on your agenda is thinking about 2 people who can help you achieve your personal goal. When I was working in business development, I decided I wanted to give back to the hospital that saved my daughter's life. So I set myself the long-term personal goal of joining the Sick Kids Foundation board. In order to achieve that goal, I knew I'd have to build relationships with the CEO as well as another person who sat on the board or had close ties to the foundation. And then you need 2 more people who can help you achieve your long-term career goal. For instance, when I was a family lawyer, if my long-term goal was to become a tech entrepreneur, I need to maintain relationships with my former boss and colleagues from the startup that I had once worked at. You can't just think about your next promotion. You also have to think ahead. Once you've identified your goals, you're ready for round 3. Figuring out if any of your hellos can go deeper. The only way I've ever found to determine which of my hellos hold promise is by engaging even more. You have to reach out, do another hello, go for coffee virtually now, see whether you share any mutual interests, and listen. Through that second hello, then third and fourth, determine whether the 2 of you are actually on the same wavelength. Do you share similar values? Can that person help you achieve your goals? Can you help them in a consequential way? Through that process, you also have to figure out how you're going to start delivering on your end of the bargain, because hub relationships are never one-sided. As you have no doubt discerned, building your hub is not a short-term project. It takes time. But if you keep connecting and curating, eventually you'll pick your 6. And once you know who those 6 people are, you'll have to start investing in those relationships methodically and consistently. How do you choose to invest depends a lot on the individual. Every case is different. When I'm thinking about nurturing one of my hub relationships, I start by asking myself what unexpected thing I can do for the other person. It can't be something meh. It has to be something meaningful and unforgettable. It's the difference between running into a store and grabbing the first thing you see on the way to your friend's birthday party compared to giving them a gift that you've put thought into and you know will touch them. When I was an articling student, I desperately wanted to be asked back to the firm where I articled. Initially, my boss didn't want to hire me. He didn't have an issue with the quality of my work. He just didn't want to hire a rookie. He wanted to hire an experienced associate, but I wanted the job badly. So I asked him what I could do to prove to him how much I wanted it. He told me he'd be teaching a course on family arbitration soon and asked me to think about what he could do to prepare for the course. That was all I needed to hear. I went into full-on research and execution mode, tracked down every article and case I could find on family arbitration, and pulled together 2 3-ring binders, each 3 inches thick, with course materials and marketing materials. Then I knocked on his office door with the binders in hand. He was sitting behind his desk when I handed them to him. I will never forget the look of surrender on his face after he flipped through them. How can I not hire you? I got the job. You may be thinking, this hub business sure sounds like a lot of work. Who's got the time to pull together binders of research? Isn't there an easier way? Can't you suggest a few shortcuts? All I can say, my friends, is no. Hub relationships are work, but it's work with a purpose and a payoff. You don't have to go to such extraordinary measures every time, and there are less time-consuming ways to invest. But what's important is that you show up, not just once, but repeatedly, and you must do what you say you're going to do. Relationships are founded on trust, and one of the ways you earn trust is by keeping your word. When I introduced myself to the mayor that morning, I thanked him for his efforts to promote the city's tech scene internationally. I knew he'd taken some flack in the press for using public resources to make that trip. So I said that when I returned home, I was going to organize an event and would take the opportunity to showcase his office's efforts on our community's behalf. Of course, he might reasonably have assumed I was just flattering him. I'm sure people flatter him all the time, but I kept my promise. I invited a member of his team to speak at our event, and I put her on the stage first. Since then, I've gone out of my way to foster that relationship. And since then, he's become one of my former organization's greatest champions. Last year, he flew back from Lisbon to participate in our inaugural summit, a turn of events I still find amazing since a year and a half earlier, he wouldn't have been able to pick me out of a lineup. So yeah, showing up is important, but you also have to show up in the right way. You can't just wing it. You have to do some serious research and thinking before you show up. For instance, a lot of people ask me for career advice. I'm usually happy to help them if I can, but if they say, I'm looking for a new job, can you help me? I'm going to get annoyed because they didn't exert themselves in any way before they approached me. You can't expect someone to move your dial if you're not moving it for yourself. The reason I got a job by sending a cold email is because I was primed for that opportunity when it came along. I put a lot of thought into the skills I had to offer an employer before I hit that send button. I didn't expect the other person to do the heavy lifting. Just as your goals change over time, so do the people who belong in your hub. No matter where you are in your trajectory your six should always be people you admire, authentically connect with, and like you, derive a benefit from the relationship. Ideally, they should always be people who can help you achieve your specific goals or are uber connected. How intensively you invest in your hub relationships will also ebb and flow depending on where you are in your own trajectory. I have some people in my hub who've helped me in the past and continue to help me in the present. I consider these my forevers. I still take care of those relationships, but I don't have to invest in them daily, unlike my hub relationships of the present moment, which require sometimes more daily attention. This brings us to a matter of hub momentum. You can't let it lapse. I'm far from perfect when it comes to my hub momentum. Sometimes I get busy with my micro goals and I forget to focus on my longer term ones. I have to continually take stock of whether I'm connecting with my hub people often enough and how I go out of my way for them. One way I have of reminding myself is to put a sticky note with their names on a notebook I carry around. That way, every time I open it, I'm reminded to invest in my hub. It's like I see that sticky note and I remember investing in it is priority number one. Investing becomes part of my daily routine like brushing my teeth. Because if I don't put that reminder in a spot where I can see it every day, I'll just forget. But if you're thoughtful and deliberate about investing in your hub and you invest wisely, before you know it, those 6 will become 9 and those 9 will become 20 and those 20 will become 50. Hub relationships are like compound interest that way. Invest early and often and your investment will grow exponentially. I developed the hub idea originally because I wanted to come up with a simple way of teaching lawyers how to attract more business. But the beauty of the hub system is that it works for anybody. It doesn't matter what your goal is. If you come to me and say, Jodi, my dream is to become the director of college admissions one day. What advice can you give me? I'd say make sure your top 6 business relationships are connected with people who, as they believe in you and want you to succeed, will send you every opportunity they can and will propel you towards your goal. To me, that's the perfect hub. So, that was a lot to read out loud, but there it is. So I'm going to take a little pause now before I keep talking, and maybe what we can do, Karen, is take some questions, and then I can come back to, as we get closer to the end, I'll talk about some specific strategies to use in light of the pandemic and how we can network remotely. But I really want to make sure that people have a chance to engage, and I need to stop talking for a few minutes.
Perfect. Thank you, Jodi. So we do have a couple of questions that came in through the registration process. I have Corel here, my colleague, who has all the questions. So Corel, do you want to jump in here?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me get my camera on. Hi, Jodi.
Hi, nice to see you.
Likewise. I really enjoyed the conversation. It kind of touched on so many things that I myself am going through. So I really appreciate the conversation. So the first question that I had is, do you equate the power of generosity with sponsorship?
Great question. So I think in order to be a really powerful, so I won't assume everybody knows what sponsorship means. So I'm just going to lay the groundwork in respect of that first. The concept of sponsorship is where someone is prepared to use their power, for lack of a better word, relationship capital, influence, experience, position of power to enable, support, advance, and champion another human. Distinguished from a mentor relationship, which is much more like, I'm going to mentor you by sharing my advice and my experience. Sponsorship is less about me, more about you. And so, for me, a powerful sponsor is someone who goes out of their way. And I talk a lot about that in my book. They are willing to use their time, energy, network, relationships and relationship chips to help others that they trust and believe in. And that requires a real value of generosity. You can't, you're not going to be someone who shows up in the world to help other people because you are forced. There is a real generosity of spirit that is required for that. So yes, I mean, I don't say that sponsorship equals generosity, but I think that to be a powerful and effective, meaningful career sponsor, you have to sort of be committed to an ethos of generosity.
Yeah, that makes sense. Another question as it relates to that is, how do you share your generosity without being taken advantage of?
This is a fantastic question. How do you share your generosity without being taken advantage of? So I think that we all have to have our own customized approach. I don't think there's a one size fits all solution. I also think like how much time, effort, energy any of us individually is going to make to sponsor other individuals really depends on where we're at in our own lives and career trajectory and what we have to give in terms of time, resources, energy. Mm-hmm. And I think that for each of us, that boundary is very personal. But I think it's really important to have the boundary. And it's really hard sometimes because people think we're like an endless pit of giving if we're people who are generous. And it's something I authentically can share. I struggle with a lot. I had a really, an interesting ask today. So, I believe in the ethos of opening doors, creating connections, helping people that don't have access to rooms and relationships. But there's only so many times that you can do that, make those asks. I'll give you an example. Often I will like to take an entrepreneur's product or service and help them sell it into a large corporation I already have a relationship with, because my giving the credibility of an introduction because of my relationship and all of my points of privilege. To be quite candid, some people really don't have those relationships because they have not had access to them. And I see it as my duty and responsibility and love actually to put into the world to act as an ally and stand in solidarity and go out of my way to create those opportunities. But I don't have the endless opportunity to do that for every single person who asks me, because then that would be the only thing I'm doing. And also there's only so many times you can ask, but without killing the relationship, right? So like on the other side. So I think it's a really fine balance. And I think everybody just has to get comfortable with what the boundary is. And don't be, there's no generosity angel watching you taking count of your actions. It's only for you in your heart and your soul, how much capacity and time, energy, resource you can and should devote to acts of service, whatever that looks like. I'll give you another example. So like I mentor sponsor, and it depends on where it is. There are some folks in my roster that I mentor because I don't actually believe in them enough to go out of my way to put them into situations. That is earned. That trust, that credibility is earned. So some folks don't even take it from a mentorship to a sponsorship relationship, and it is really a dual responsibility. But I'm sort of at my capacity for that. And I'm not apologetic about it. I have 8 women that I actively coach and mentor. I have 6 folks that I actively, coach in a formal coaching role with a sliding scale, because I think it's really important actually to enable folks that want to access coaching resources to compensate for it. And for me, beyond my coaching capacity to my mentoring capacity to sort of value my own time. But that's in addition to having, 3 different massive contracts that I'm working on to pay my bills. So I don't have more space. And that doesn't mean I don't want to be generous. It doesn't mean that I don't want to be helpful. It doesn't mean I don't feel really bad when a young folk comes to me, particularly someone who, really needs my help, but I don't have unlimited energy, and neither do any of you. So I don't think, there is any problem or anything wrong with deciding what the bucket is that you have for service of this nature. And then once the bucket is full, being boundaried around protecting your energy. It's a very hard balance though.
Yeah, and in those moments, how do you hold people accountable when they are, disrespecting those boundaries?
You just keep affirming them and then you don't engage. Like, I don't think I've certainly had that. And I even had it this week. I had a woman who is a lovely human being, like a truly lovely human being. And she's built a really beautiful business. And it's very much right in a space that I'm interested in. And she's asked me to get together to go for a walk and to discuss it 3 times. And then she invited me to an event, like without asking me, just sending me the invite to like participate in something. And I just wrote her back like a very loving but firm email that said, thank you so much for your interest. I am extremely focused on some of my commitments right now. And I am not able to commit to when I could go for a walk to discuss your business and or brainstorm and or provide advice. Just not, I don't have the capacity. I really wish you well. And if and when I have the capacity, I will reach out to you. It doesn't mean that as a woman entrepreneur, she doesn't need help from someone who can help. It doesn't mean that I don't love her business idea. It doesn't mean that I don't want to be, a beautiful ally to folks that really need it. But I personally will turn into a shard on the ground if I continue to give of my well when there is not enough. I'm already like sort of back at a pace that is beyond my comfort. And I was like, whoa, something I got in the pandemic was like very clear feelings around my own personal boundary and my capacity. And, for me personally, it's a bit tricky because the movement that I built is built on the premise of generosity of spirit and being helpful. But every individual who asks me for help doesn't understand that I get 50 requests a day like that. And I did it already, 3 hours of processing today. This person who wanted an introduction here, and this person who needed recommended for equity training. And like I spent 3 hours today already doing that. I don't have more time. And that does not make me a person who is not generous. It just, you have to put on your own mask. I have to get my own responsibilities done.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. Next question. Following your passion or focusing on what you are really good at and getting great at it, which path would you advise a young professional to take?
Sorry, can you ask me the first part of the question?
Sure.
I got distracted by the comments to ourselves. I got to just focus on you. Sorry. There's an authenticity of this conversation.
I know. So the question was following your passion or focusing on what you're really good at or getting great at it. Which path would you advise a young professional to take?
Yeah, great question. So this is really what I think about this. Life is short. I think, certainly for me, this moment in the pandemic where, everything in my life really dramatically changed has, crystallized that life is so fragile. And if we know that life is fragile, and the notion of someday maybe I'll do something I want to do once I've developed the skills at this thing I don't like or I hate or is mediocre, like for what are we waiting? And I really do believe that we can, despite the darkness of this time, I hope look for the lessons and the light. And that one of the lessons and light of this time is like, let's not waste any time. So I think, and it's a whole chapter in my book around where passion meets purpose. And I think that we should all really try our best to the best of our ability where it is possible. And I make no assumption for some folks, it is not possible. But where it is possible to make your work marry your passion and or emanate from your heart and learn your skills in an area that interests you and excites you and drives you and motivates you to want to get up every day, you will find greater joy and peace and become better at those skills. So did it help me to be a family law lawyer for many years before I went and did other things? Yeah, sure. I ended up becoming a fantastic communicator. I feel that My success in sales, you know, I can attribute to my boss as a lawyer who taught me how to communicate effectively. Was that the only route? No. Could I have learned how to do that doing something I was more passionate about? Yes.
I mean, this question brings me back, you know, just to the decisions that I made. And just like you said, you know, you're not saying that you shouldn't have done your first step. It's just that at this point, it's best to just follow your passion and have it just join with your purpose.
Well, I just think you can marry the things, right? It's like whatever your, you know, what is your technical role, for example? We're having a chat.
Oh, for me? Oh, yeah. Well, I work with WXN.
Yes.
But for the most part, my passion is human connection, is, you know, trauma relief. It's psychotherapy, just getting our minds right. So that's my passion, and that's how I'm connecting to purpose.
I love that. And so, you know, here you are working with an organization that does bring that out in you. You could be doing that work where it's not connected to something you're most passionate about. So I think we all have technical skills.
Yeah.
But the more we can be living in our truth, I think the happier we're going to be. Absolutely. And I just think this pandemic has proven, like, because of the nature of COVID-19 and that it could hit anyone and none of us really know what could happen, whether we're healthy or not healthy. I don't know. For me, it's really made me think of my own fragility and mortality, and really be grateful and honor and cherish and hold what I do with my time and energy much more carefully.
Yeah, I completely agree. Okay, so what is a best practice for you to be generous and kind to yourself? That's the first part of the question. And then how has kindness made a difference for those people that you interact with in tech? Men specifically.
Yeah. So kindness with respect to myself. So I would say this is a practice, and it's something I've struggled with for many years, and I continue to struggle with. I am, you know, really perfectionist-y. I have a real problem with perfectionism. And when I'm stressed or anxious, it becomes intensified. So for example, don't tell anyone, but when I'm overwhelmed, I like start a new notebook. I've done it for years. I will pull out a new notebook. I want to write it neater boxes, more organized, categorized, like perfect. And as soon as I make a messy note, I get so overwhelmed by the mess that I need a new notebook. And I'm not proud of this. This is like a really deep dark, okay? But that's an example of something that I've struggled with. So a self-loving practice that I have been undertaking is I've really learned to meditate. I've spent the last 8 months of the pandemic really focused on my meditation practice and learning how to use breath to find self-compassion and peace. And, you know, for me, the practice of mindfulness and being really self-aware and self-compassionate and using these approaches of mindful, intentional self-compassion to overcome some of our own demons. For example, in my case, perfectionism, where I really fuss, where there is a note that's not neat enough, or if I'm missing one task from the list, feeling I need to start it again. That's a real demon for me. So using this intentional practice to come back to, I can live with a messy page in my notebook, and I can go to sleep with some undone tasks because I did as much as I can today and now my body needs to rest, I actually believe has made me much more impactful as a CEO and as a practitioner, because I believe that, you know, deeply, that bringing mindfulness and in particular self-compassion is an absolute key to unlocking your ability to then actually focus and do deep work. We can get really mired in and stuck in our own ways about, you know, fixating and stressing and going in circles about it. So for me, that's a practice. in terms of being kind to myself, because I'm not very kind to myself in my internal dialogue, despite what it looks like on the outside. And, you know, on the other side of things, like, I think kindness is, you know, one of the great kindnesses that I think I was shown as, you know, the human I am with all of my particular intersections. You know, I'm educated, cisgender, I'm straight, I'm white, I'm able-bodied, I'm all of those privileges. And the inclusion journey that I went on when I came to an ecosystem that was very homogeneous has been long and complex. And I've had to learn and unlearn many, many, many things myself. So I was shown great kindness from many teachers that I've had over the many years I've been doing this work, who've been patient and loving and teaching me the difference between impact and intent, teaching me about the concept of microaggressions, teaching me about language, teaching me about psychologically safe, sometimes the hard way, where I lost one of my most star employees because I did not understand at one time the impact of my own microaggressions, despite having thought I was super evolved in this work. So for me, the kindness we can show to men, back to your question, is to do this work with love and generosity of heart, and to be, you know, advocating and requiring, demanding the type of policies, procedures, metrics, appropriate behaviors, dealing with it head on when the behaviors are not appropriate, yet at the same time giving grace to those leaders that we need to bring along. Because if we shame people too early in the journey, they just would run away. And I feel very lucky to have received that. And I know that my work impacted thousands and thousands of people. And had I, you know, been shamed or called out aggressively or unkindly versus called in early on in this work, I would have given up 4 years ago and not even tried.
Do you find that it's easier to be kind to others than to yourself?
Yes. I tell my daughter often, you know, we have to treat ourselves as though we're like a best friend. And sometimes that's really hard. Yeah, it's really hard. You know, I think it's a practice, right? I truly believe that being kind to ourselves is a practice that is part of a mindfulness practice of bringing great intention to what our thoughts are. Yeah. Because our thoughts drive our beliefs, and our beliefs drive our actions, and our actions also drive our thoughts and beliefs. So when we wake up and we tell ourselves, I love you, you have everything you need, you are beautiful, you've got this, it's okay that you didn't finish those things, or the dishwasher's full, or you didn't vacuum, or whatever. You know, that self-compassion opens space to then bring the energy, joy, and focus to what the tasks are, or the productive work, or the workout, or the project, or whatever we want to get done. If we come to that task, agenda, day with this like unkind, negative self-talk, like we are doing nothing that is good. And then if we do the things, then our thoughts will actually start to find pride. And I don't know about you, but I feel pride, having deep, deep, intentional pride in myself for taking actions that I committed to myself I would take, is actually what can beget confidence. And then confidence to trust ourselves, to trust our intuition, right? And I don't know about you, but certainly I find that when I make a commitment to myself, even if that is to be kind and self-loving, but maybe it will be, I am going to exercise 4 times a week, or I am going to check my emails between 9 and 9:30 every day, or I'm going to get my inbox to 0 every week so that I can sleep and relax over the weekend, whatever the commitment is we make to self, or I will not do that toxic behavior, or I will not do that toxic relationship, or I will not let that human's words hurt me, whatever the thing is that is a commitment you make to yourself, and then you break it, that self-loathing and shame that is very toxic can come up again, and then gets you stuck in not trusting yourself. So then it's actually even harder to do the thing. So Laura McGowan, who I think I talked about earlier, who's an author who wrote a book that I loved. I'm blocking in it this minute. I'll come back to me in a few minutes. Oh, The Luckiest. She talks about quoting this woman she met in her AA that said, push off from here. And that concept is very powerful for me. Push off from here. So can we drop the self-loathing, the shame, the whole conversation about how shitty a job we did and find kindness for ourselves, and through that kindness sort of offer ourselves the opportunity to push off from here with a fresh slate, with love, and try again.
Yeah. You know what? We're just simply doing the best that we can is how I look at it. We're just doing the best we can.
Yes. And that, the way that you even just said that was so beautiful, because that, like, that self-compassion. And by the way, the world is asking a lot of us right now.
Yeah.
And all of us, for our own reasons in different ways, have our own pain and grief in this time, and all the layers and trauma and grief of many, that pandemic, the second pandemic after the many murders of such beautiful people. I mean, and all of us dealing with our own home situations. It is all a bit of a mess. So we just have to be self-loving right now.
Yeah. I really enjoyed this conversation. I'm just going to say that. I know we're having a moment right now.
I know we're having a moment. It's beautiful. I would much rather talk about this stuff than give you step by step. It's much more fun and real, right? That's the thing. Yeah. Any more questions? I'm ready. Bring it on.
That's it for now. I'm gonna leave what we have for the end. But yeah, continue doing what you're doing. I appreciate you, and I'm sure the audience appreciates you as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I think, this exactly what we just did, sharing this moment, being in the moment, connecting human to human. You brought your video on. I can see your beautiful face. You're smiling at me. We're engaging. That is like really what I want to leave you all with, is like, there has never been a more important time to connect human to human.
Yeah.
And it's very, very hard, right? Because some of us don't feel like it. I am doing a keynote presentation today, and I'm wearing sweatpants and slippers, but I have my cute outfit on top. This is a weird world, right? This is just the way the world is. Like, I used to be in heels and have a makeup and hair artist here at 6 a.m. every time I did one of these. And now I'm the makeup and hair artist, and I've got the slippers on. So I think, recognizing it's a lot easier. Many of us feel more comfortable being at home alone in our sweats, often video off, because we want to do other work while people are talking, and we're bored of being on Zoom because it sucks. We have a choice to sort of go down the rabbit hole of like, pandemic sucks, it's so terrible, Zoom sucks, I hate my life. Or we have a choice, which I always talk to my daughter about, of like finding the lemonade of this situation and sort of taking it day by day and saying, what is something positive that I can look for today? And what is a positive action I can take that's pushing off from here, that's looking forward, that's building and creating versus surviving, that is thriving versus just getting by. And I think those are the moments where we really have the opportunity to say, who is one human that I can connect with soul to soul? And yes, can that help your career in the long term? Can you build a hub relationship? I hope so, where what you're focused on is your career. But for you, it might be personal. It might just be a soul to soul human connection with a beautiful human being who takes the time to show up, and you take the time to show up. What I've been doing lately has been having Zoom dinners with people, because I really am very isolated. When my daughter's not here, I'm really alone. And I am lonely. Right? So yeah, I mean, right? You're probably lonely too. We're all lonely, right? This is hard. And so we have the opportunity to say, hey, do you want to have dinner? Like, I don't really have the energy to have a whole chat about everything going on in my life, but do you want to just take food together and break bread over Zoom so you're not sitting alone? Or have a 15-minute chat while you're on a walk, or, have a practice of like, I'm going to connect with these 3 people, and have a little sticky note that's on your desk that sort of says, I'm going to reach out proactively to these 3 people just to say hello. Back to that.
Yeah.
And, or, what I see myself doing, I'll give you an example. So I'm doing lots of things. I'm doing some equity and inclusion consulting. I'm doing some growth strategy consulting for a tech company. I'm doing coaching, and I'm also building. I took my meditation teacher training, as I told you. I haven't told anyone this yet, but I am also starting a yoga teacher practice training that I'm starting Saturdays for the rest of the year. And I'm building, like, I want to be of service. I want to build and curate a community where we can share on this level of soul to soul. How do we mindfully approach our practices, habits, routines, so that we can succeed in business and life? And relationships are part of it. But it's also about our self-love and self-compassion and letting go of shame and practices around intention setting and all of that. And that really comes from my soul and heart. But I don't know how to do that. I'm like terrible at producing like content by myself. I currently have to send it all to someone who edits it and puts it on my Instagram because I suck at it. So I need to make some people in my hub intentionally who can teach me, who can show me, who can mentor me, who can support me. And if I don't think the business will manifest, you know? And so I can push off from here and say, who are some folks who can teach me, help me, support me, and make time every week proactively. And then I will feel forward looking and pushing off from here versus stuck and mired in like, my life is so shitty, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just simply being present. And, you know, you can also pay it forward to someone else, and you never know how aligned and how you'll attract everything that you need to get that done, to achieve that goal.
Absolutely. And you never know when you put it out there, right? In the world and connect vulnerably, right? Even being on this call with all these humans, like, who knows how any of us could help each other. And yes, you were all here to listen to me talk, but like, frankly, say hello to each other, right? Like, it's really not about me. It's about you and us as a community coming together to connect and sort of, if anyone wants to help each other, if anybody is feeling lonely and needs to reach out or connect, or, you know, it's like, how can we really, you know, support one another in moving our own dials and moving the dial together for each other. So, you know, I just really encourage you to be highly intentional in this time, but also really compassionate with yourselves around, you know, your boundaries. And when you need to rest, rest.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I end up like having like a midday nap, which I never would have done in my, right? Does anybody else here have a midday nap?
Ooh.
Delicious. Anyway, so that's really all I've got to share for today. And if anybody has any more questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'll wait a couple of minutes in case anybody ever has any questions. But otherwise, I really appreciate you coming and making the time and choosing to participate today. And I really hope, you know, each of you can find the lemonade in this very dark time, and wishing you all well and wellness.
Thank you so much, Jodi. So we're just going to give it a couple of minutes here for our audience to put their questions in the chat box. So if anyone has any questions.
A lot of comments, very inspiring and motivating.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Indeed, thank you for being so authentic, Jodi.
You're welcome. I mean, what's the point of not being, truthfully? There's too many boring people that just say the stuffy corporate message. I'm kind of over it.
All right. So thank you so much, Jodi, for all the great insights, for being authentic, and for such an inspiring and powerful session. Like you said at the beginning, there are no magic bullets on how we can move the dial. It's really a small combination of small acts. So I want to thank you again for really having the intention to making a change in our community. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. Everybody have a fantastic day. Talk to you all soon. And feel free to join on social, DM me if you want to get in touch on Instagram.
Thank you so much, Jodi.
Bye.
Before we go, we just have a couple of slides to go over. So my colleague Gary will bring in here. Thank you, Gary. So for those who would like to purchase Jodi's book, it's available on Move the Dial website, and you can also purchase it from apple.com. We have our next virtual book club events happening in March, on March 18th with Glory Meldrum. So on Warrior, she's surviving sexual abuse to building the first world-class treatment center for kids that have been sexually abused. And we have another one happening in April with Leslie Ann Scorchi. Feel free to visit our website to learn more about these two virtual book club events that are really interesting. We encourage you to join our powerful WXN community today for as little as $8.25 a month or a one-time payment of $99. And we also have our Monday Mojo events. So every Monday we have our WXN brand ambassadors for the month of February, talking about the ripple effects, reflections, intention, planning, and legacy, featuring both Miley Wang and Denise Potier. And at last, we have our IG Wealth Management event as well on February 11th and February 25th. So please feel free, don't miss out on all those great events. Feel free to check out all our amazing events on our website. And thank you so much, everyone, for attending our webinar, and have a wonderful day.